Hi, I'm Kellen from the Delaware County District Library, and I'm going to talk to you about spellcasting in this How to Play D&D video. Spellcasting can be one of the trickier things to get your head around when you're first getting introduced to Dungeons & Dragons. If this is your first time playing D&D, I would maybe suggest sticking to one of the martial characters, like a fighter, a monk, or a rogue. Once you are ready to go and you've had a lot of experience around or using spells, by all means take advantage of the full spellcasters like clerics and wizards and sorcerers. But whichever one you choose, let's look at how spellcasting works in a general sense, and we'll go through some of the information that you need to know. To begin, as a spellcaster, you have access to spells. Spells have levels ranging from 1 to 9, and the higher the level of the spell, generally the more powerful the spell is going to be. As a newbie spellcaster, you'll be limited to just level 1 spells, but as you level up, you'll get access to higher levels of spells and the increased power that comes with that. There's also another level of spell known as a cantrip. Think of those kind of like a level 0. Cantrips are the most basic level of spell that you first learned when you began spellcasting. Those that you've trained for so long, you can cast them without thinking about them. These don't use up any spell slots, which we'll get to in just a moment, and they have no limit to the number of times you can cast them in a day, but they are generally weaker spells. However, they will power up over time as you level up. In the player's handbook, there's a wide variety of spells that your character may have access to. Not every character has access to every spell, and not all of those are available at any given time. Depending on your class, you'll either know a certain number of spells at a given time, or you have to prepare a certain number of spells from your full list. Some classes like the Bard and Sorcerer know just a certain number of spells. Once they level up, they'll learn some more spells, but that's still a limited number. Others like Cleric and Wizard have access to this full list of spells, but they have to prepare a certain number of them each day after a long rest, and they get only use those until they've taken another long rest. Look at the information for your specific class in the player's handbook to learn more about how your class handles the number of spells that you know. Just like spells have levels, your character can only cast spells of the levels that they have access to. These are called spell slots. And starting as a newbie spellcaster, you'll have access to only level 1 spell slots. As you level up, you'll gain more spell slots and spell slots of higher levels. Whenever casting a spell, you can cast it in a level of the same level as the spell, or in a slot that is higher than the spell's level. For instance, Cure Wounds is a level 1 spell, so my level 3 cleric can cast it at level 1, or they could cast it at a level 2 since they have a level 2 spell slot. In fact, doing so will heal more hit points because the spell is cast at a higher level. However, my cleric cannot cast a level 2 spell, Augury, in a level 1 spell slot. You can only cast spells in slots that are equal to or higher than the spell's level. Some spells have the ability to be cast as a ritual. These are special spells that can be cast like normal, taking whatever amount of time they normally use to cast, or you could instead cast it as a ritual by taking 10 uninterrupted minutes to cast it and not use a spell slot in doing so. If you've seen our video on combat, you know the different types of actions. These come into play here with the casting time. Most spells will say 1 action, 1 bonus action, or 1 reaction. But others give a time anywhere from 1 minute to 1 hour. This is the amount of time that it takes to cast the spell, and you need to account for that in the middle of combat. Spells also have a range going from self up to hundreds of feet. You must have a clear line of sight to your target when casting a spell, but a few of these are specific, in which they say self, where you can cast it only on yourself. However, touch means you can cast it on yourself or any other creature as long as you are close enough to touch them. Any spell giving a distance then requires you to be a certain number of feet away from it and within that range. Spells have up to 3 components: verbal, somatic, and material. Verbal means that your character is actually saying something, like an incantation or specific words needed to cast the spell. Somatic refers to hand gestures used in casting the spell. And material components are physical things that are needed and are often consumed when casting the spell. In most cases, a spellcasting focus or component pouch will handle your material components, but some spells like Augury list a material component with a specific gold cost. In this case, you must have those items in order to cast a spell, though some DMs may ignore that rule and allow for spellcasters to just use a spellcasting focus for any spell. Spells have a duration which indicates how long the spell lasts for. Some spells have instantaneous effect, while others, like Mordekainen's Magnificent Mansion, have a duration of 24 hours and will last as long as the spell lasts. In a similar vein, concentration is a condition with certain spells that require the spellcaster to focus all of their energy on maintaining that spell, or else it goes away. This allows it to be an ongoing effect, and when you cast a spell with concentration, you cannot cast another spell with concentration without giving up concentration on the first. Additionally, if you take damage while you have a concentration spell active, you may break your concentration. If you take damage, make a Constitution saving throw with a DC of 10 or half of the damage taken, whichever is higher. If you fail the saving throw, you lose concentration and you'll have to cast the spell again. Some spells have an area of effect. These are cast to specific places on the board based on how the spell works. The area of effects are line, cone, cube, sphere, and cylinder. These spells are all cast at a certain point within your range for the spell, and then from that point outward, the spell takes effect within that area. For instance, my druid casts the Entangle spell. This has a range of 90 feet, so I decide to cast it 45 feet away from me, centered on a group of enemies. From that point out, the spell takes up a 20-foot cube from the casting point. Anything within that 20-foot cube is now under the effect of the Entangle spell, or has to make a save against it, at least. Some spells use attack rolls. This is just like a melee or ranged attack. You roll 1d20 and add your spellcasting ability modifier as indicated by your class, and add your proficiency modifier as well. Other spells list a spell save DC. These are spells that require your opponent to make a save against what your attack is. For that, the DC is determined as 8 plus your spellcasting modifier and your proficiency. That wraps up our how-to guide for spellcasting. As always, check with your DM to see if they have any special considerations when it comes to spellcasters or how they're played. And you can find more information on how your specific class handles spells or what other spells can do by consulting the player's handbook. Thanks for watching, and happy gaming.